In every corner of the galaxy, there was one rule that even the most arrogant empires dared not break. A law older than treaties, older than borders, older even than the council itself. It was not written in ink nor carved into stone, yet it lived in the whispers of soldiers, the orders of commanders, the warnings of elders. The first rule was simple: do not harm human children. It was not kindness that kept the rule alive, nor morality, nor some shared idea of justice. It was fear. Fear that had survived centuries. Fear that had passed through generations. Fear that even the boldest warriors could not laugh away. For the galaxy knew what happened the last time the rule had been broken. Long ago, before the council had united its fleets into a single banner, before order spread across the stars, there had been wars fought on the edges of human space. In one of those wars, desperate raiders had made the mistake of striking where no one else dared. They had attacked a human nursery ship, thinking it a soft target, a simple prize. They thought no one would avenge it. What followed had been so brutal that even centuries later, the galaxy trembled at the stories. The humans had hunted every raider, every ally of the raiders, every species who had aided them. They did not stop when the guilty were dead. They did not stop when justice was served. They kept going until fleets burned, until homeworlds screamed, until entire species begged for mercy at the council's feet. From that day forward, every soldier, every commander, every empire learned the same lesson: do not harm human children. It became a rule stronger than law, carried in silence, passed from mouth to mouth in warnings and whispers. And for centuries, the rule held. Even in wars where planets were burned and cities turned to ash, the children of humanity were left untouched, for no one was foolish enough to tempt that storm again. But arrogance is a poison, and time makes even old fears feel distant. In the vast chamber of the Galactic Council, where the leaders of 100 species gathered beneath a dome of light, arrogance now spoke louder than memory. Delegates lounged in their seats, their bodies wrapped in ceremonial armor and flowing robes, their voices sharp with pride. They had heard the whispers of the rule, but to them, it was only myth, an exaggeration told by frightened soldiers. One delegate, his crystalline body shining in the light, raised his voice proudly. This rule you speak of, this superstition, does anyone truly believe it? Humanity is weak, fragile, barely holding its colonies together. Do you truly think they would dare challenge the council if we pressed them? Others nodded, some laughing softly, their voices filled with mockery. A scaled warlord from the Tarvek clans slammed his fist against the table, his booming laugh shaking the chamber. Children or not, they are still only humans. If their younglings are taken, what will they do? Cry? Beg? They cannot touch us. They cannot fight us. The galaxy belongs to the council now, not to old ghosts of the past. His words drew agreement from many, their arrogance growing stronger as each voice joined the chorus. Only a few remained silent, their eyes uneasy, their memories long. One elder, her face lined with centuries of wisdom, spoke in a trembling voice. You speak foolishness. The rule was not made for mercy. It was made from fear. Fear of what happens when humanity is pushed too far. You mock them now, but you forget what they truly are. Do not break the rule. Her warning was met with laughter, cruel and sharp. Old myths, another delegate sneered, his mandibles clicking in amusement. You are afraid of shadows. Humanity has no power here. We control the fleets. We control the stars. What could they do if we chose to test them? The chamber filled with noise, voices rising, laughter echoing, arrogance choking the air. The warnings were drowned out, buried beneath pride. And so the first seeds of disaster were planted. In the shadows of the chamber, far from the laughter and jeers, quiet figures met in secret. Not all of the council was blinded by arrogance, but some were poisoned by ambition. They whispered among themselves, voices low and sharp, their words carried not by pride but by cold calculation. If we break the rule, humanity will bend, one said. They will have no choice but to accept our authority. If they protest, they will be alone. The other species will not defend them. This is our chance to show them their place. Another voice joined, colder still. The humans have grown bold. Too many colonies. Too many ships in the void. They act as if they are equals to us. If we take their children, we break their spirit. We remind them that they are nothing without our mercy. Their whispers formed into plans, their plans hardened into orders, and soon those orders would flow through channels hidden from the eyes of the chamber. Ships would be sent, enforcers dispatched, soldiers ordered to strike where no one else dared. The first rule would be broken. But as the secret orders were written, as the ink of arrogance stained the council's records, the air itself seemed to grow heavier, as if the chamber carried the weight of the galaxy's oldest warning. The few elders who still remembered the past shifted uneasily, their hearts pounding with dread. They had seen what happened when humanity's children were harmed. They had seen how restraint could turn into fury, how silence could turn into war. But their voices were ignored, their warnings dismissed. The council was blind, and in their blindness, they had already chosen their fate. The human ambassador, silent at the edge of the chamber, said nothing. He listened to the laughter, to the arrogance, to the whispers of plans forming in the dark. His face was calm, his expression polite, but his eyes were cold, sharp, and watchful. He had heard enough. The first rule was about to be broken. And when it was, the galaxy would remember why it had existed in the first place, far from the glittering halls of the council chamber. In the cold silence of space, a fleet of council enforcers moved without banners or fanfare. Their ships carried no colors, no symbols, only the gray hulls of vessels meant for control and intimidation. These were not diplomats, not peacekeepers, but shadows sent to do what the council could not admit publicly. Their orders were simple but unthinkable. Strike at a human colony, take the children, and leave a message behind that no one could ignore. The commanders on board whispered among themselves, their voices uneasy. Some had fought humans before, seen them fight with a ferocity unlike other species. Others dismissed the stories as exaggerations, relics of old wars. One officer, his scales pale and trembling, asked quietly, "Are we truly doing this? Do we really dare?" His superior sneered, his voice sharp. "The council commands it. The humans must be reminded of their place. We strike, we take their younglings, and they will learn fear. They will bow, and the galaxy will see that even humanity obeys us." Yet even as he spoke, his eyes flickered with doubt. The first rule was not a legend to him. He had heard it whispered in the barracks, spoken in the fearful voices of soldiers who had survived the last time it was broken. Still, orders were orders, and the fleet pressed on. On the surface of a small colony world, the humans lived in peace, far from the council's politics. The colony was young, filled with families who had built homes among the forests and rivers, who raised crops beneath the pale light of two suns. Children played in open fields, their laughter echoing across the hills, their joy untouched by the struggles of the galaxy. They were innocent, unknowing, unprepared for what was about to come. The attack came at dawn. The sky darkened with the shadows of descending ships, their engines roaring like thunder across the colony. The humans looked up in confusion, some rushing to shelters, others calling for aid. But the soldiers who emerged from the ships carried no hesitation. They spread through the colony in formation, their weapons raised, their voices booming. "By order of the council, you are in violation of interstellar law. Submit." But it was no ordinary arrest, no simple punishment. Their true orders were darker. Doors were broken down, homes ransacked, children dragged screaming from their families' arms. Mothers fought desperately, fathers resisted with tools and bare hands, but the soldiers were too many. Shots rang out, smoke filled the streets, and the cries of the innocent cut deeper than any weapon. A teacher who tried to shield her students fell with a single blast, her hand still outstretched toward the frightened children she had tried to protect. In the chaos, one boy managed to slip free, his small legs carrying him into the forest. His heart pounded, his breath ragged, but he clutched a tiny communicator in his hand, pressing the button again and again. Static filled the air, but through the crackle his voice broke through, desperate and trembling. "Please, someone. They are taking us. The council. They are taking the children." The message pulsed into the void, carried on waves of light, racing across the stars. The soldiers did not notice, their focus on their orders, their cruelty blind to the consequences. They gathered the children into transport ships, their tiny faces streaked with tears, their voices crying for parents who would never see them again. The fleet rose back into the sky, leaving fire and ruin behind. The colony burned, its homes shattered, its families broken. The survivors could only watch in horror as their sons and daughters vanished into the dark. And in the silence that followed, a fear older than the council itself began to stir once more. Across the galaxy, ships picked up fragments of the boy's desperate message. Traders whispered of it in docking bays, smugglers carried it in secret channels, and within hours, the words spread farther than the council could silence them. They took the children. The phrase carried on every wave, every signal, every whisper. It spread like fire, impossible to contain. Even species who despised humanity felt their blood run cold at the news, for they too knew the rule. They knew what had been broken. In the hidden archives of old veterans, memories stirred, records long buried came alive. Some trembled, others wept, and a few laughed bitterly, shaking their heads. "Fools," they whispered. "The council has doomed us all." In the halls of the council, arrogance still reigned. Delegates congratulated themselves, believing the humans would finally bow, finally bend under their authority. They did not understand the storm they had unleashed. They did not hear the silence that had fallen across human space, a silence heavier than any threat, a silence that meant something terrible was already awakening. For humanity had many laws, many treaties, many rules, but none older, none stronger, none deeper than this. Do not harm the children. The council had broken the first rule, and in doing so, they had broken the galaxy's last shield against human wrath. The boy's message still echoed, carried on channels, whispered in stations, spreading faster than light. They took the children. And those who heard it knew, the storm was coming. The small boy ran through the thick trees, his legs trembling, lungs burning, but he did not stop. Behind him the smoke from the colony rose like a black scar into the sky, the screams of families still echoing in his ears. He clutched the small communicator tight against his chest, pressing the button again and again, his voice breaking each time. "Please, someone hear me. They are taking the children, the council soldiers. They are taking us." His signal was weak, his words broken by static, but the desperation in his voice carried farther than anyone could have imagined. Across the dark of space, traders and smugglers picked up the transmission first. In quiet stations along the edge of human space, engineers froze as the boy's voice crackled through their consoles. Miners deep in asteroid belts turned their heads when the signal echoed in their helmets. On distant ships bound for nowhere, captains listened in silence, their jaws tight, their hands shaking. They took the children. It was only 4 words, but those 4 words spread like wildfire, unstoppable, uncontrollable, faster than the council could silence. At first some refused to believe it. "It must be false," they whispered. "The council would never. They know the rule." But denial faded quickly as more fragments of the signal were confirmed. The message was traced back to the burning colony, its silence a grave confirmation of truth. The images that followed, smoke rising from the settlement, bodies lying in the streets, homes broken, left no room for doubt. The council had done the unthinkable. The first rule had been broken. In the grand stations of neutral worlds, crowds gathered around public screens as the boy's trembling voice was replayed again and again. Parents pulled their own children closer, their faces pale, their eyes filled with dread. Soldiers who had fought in the old wars lowered their heads, their bodies stiff with memory. They remembered the stories of what had happened long ago, the last time such a mistake was made. And their voices carried the same warning: the storm is coming. Even species who had no love for humanity felt a chill crawl through their blood. The rule was not only humanity's protection, it was the galaxy's shield. It kept the Deathworlders contained, kept their wrath buried under layers of patience and courtesy. To break the rule was to break the one barrier that had kept humanity's fury from spreading again. In hidden corners of the council, some delegates began to panic as the reports poured in. They had ordered silence, But silence was impossible. Too many had heard, too many were speaking. The boy's desperate cry had spread beyond control. It was no longer a whisper. It was a storm's first thunder. In human space, the message hit like a blade. Colonies far from the attack heard it first, and shock turned quickly to anger. Families wept, their grief sharp and raw. Veterans clenched their fists, their old scars burning as if reopened. Soldiers whispered to each other in barracks, their eyes hard, their voices low. On Earth itself, the signal was received in the dead of night, and the entire planet seemed to freeze. In the command halls beneath the surface, leaders stood silent as the boy's voice played on the speakers. Some tried to speak, but their words failed. The sound of a child's fear was enough to silence even the most hardened generals. At last one officer broke the silence, his voice cold and steady. So they have broken the rule. Around him, heads turned, faces grim, jaws tight. No one argued. No one doubted. The first rule had been broken, and that meant only one thing. Humanity's patience had ended. Out among the stars, traders and wanderers carried the message to every port, every station, every corner of the galaxy. In the dark bars where smugglers drank, in the great halls where empires gathered, the words echoed, they took the children. Species who once mocked humanity now shook their heads in dread, for they understood what the Council had forgotten. You could insult a human. You could blockade their worlds. You could even fight their fleets and burn their colonies. But you never touched their children. Those who did not survive to speak of it. The boy's signal was replayed one last time before the device finally died in his hands, the static swallowing his voice. But it was enough. His words were now carried by thousands of mouths, recorded in thousands of channels, etched into the hearts of millions who heard them. They took the children. The galaxy shivered at the sound. In the chamber of the council, delegates congratulated themselves still, blind to the fear spreading beyond their walls. They believed humanity would come begging for talks, begging for mercy, begging for compromise. They laughed as they signed papers and spoke of victory. They did not hear the silence in human space. They did not feel the air growing heavy. They did not see the fleets already beginning to vanish from their docks. For humanity had heard the signal, and humanity had remembered. The first rule had been broken, and now the galaxy would remember why it had been made in the first place. The council chamber glittered under the great dome of light, but for the first time in centuries, it felt less like a throne room and more like a cage. Delegates from every species filled their seats, their voices rising in overlapping arguments. Some shouted about order, others demanded silence, and a few whispered their fear in trembling tones, but all of them stole glances toward one figure at the far end of the chamber. The human ambassador. He had arrived without ceremony, his simple uniform free of medals, his hands clasped behind his back as he stood quietly. He had not spoken a single word since entering, not even a greeting. And that silence pressed on the chamber heavier than any speech could have. The delegates expected rage, expected shouting, expected the humans to plead for the return of their children. But no words came. Only silence. The ambassador's calm face, his steady gaze, made every insult sound thinner, every laugh less certain. The council's high speaker, his crystalline body glowing faintly, slammed his staff against the floor. Order, he demanded. We must address this matter with reason. Humanity has suffered a misunderstanding. His words faltered under his own voice, as if he knew they carried no weight. Across the chamber, a scaled warlord rose to his feet, his armor gleaming, his voice booming. This is not our crime. The council does what it must. If humanity cannot control its colonies, then perhaps they should not be allowed colonies at all. The children will teach them humility. His words drew laughter from a handful of delegates, but it was nervous, brittle, like glass cracking under strain. The laughter died quickly when the ambassador finally raised his head. He did not speak. He only looked at them. His eyes swept across the chamber, calm but sharp, as if cutting through their arrogance without needing a single blade. Delegates shifted in their seats, some clearing their throats, others looking away. The silence grew deeper. The ambassador moved at last, stepping forward to the center of the chamber. Every footstep echoed like thunder. Though he walked without haste, his movements smooth, controlled. He stopped beneath the dome, directly under the council's seal, and folded his hands in front of him. His face was still calm. His mouth did not move, but his presence filled the hall more than the loudest voice could have. The High Speaker tried again, his voice trembling. "Ambassador, surely you have words to say. This is not the time for silence. If you wish to appeal to the council, then speak." Still, the human said nothing. He stared at the chamber, at the faces of those who had ordered the unthinkable, at those who had laughed when the first rule was broken. His silence was no longer courtesy, it was judgment. And they felt it. Delegates whispered among themselves, their voices carrying panic. Why is he not speaking? Why does he just stand there? What are they planning? The veterans in the chamber, those few who still remembered the last time humanity's wrath was unleashed, began to sweat. They recognized this silence, this patience, this heavy stillness before the storm. One elderly delegate, her voice shaking, leaned toward her peers. "Fools! You do not understand. They do not need to shout. They do not need to beg. This silence means it has already begun." Her words spread like a shadow, and unease tightened its grip on the chamber. The Tarvek warlord slammed his fist again, trying to regain control. "Speak, human. Do you hear me? Speak. Do you demand your children back? Do you threaten us with war? Say it. Say something." The ambassador's gaze turned slowly toward him. No anger. No smile. Only cold, quiet eyes that made the massive warrior flinch and look away. The silence deepened again, stretching across every corner of the chamber until the sound of breath and heartbeat seemed too loud. At last the High Speaker, desperate to fill the void, spoke again. "Perhaps humanity requires time. We will deliberate. We will return the children once the council agrees on conditions. There is no need for rash actions." But his words were already too late. The human ambassador did not nod. He did not bow. He did not even acknowledge the offer. He simply stood still, and in that stillness, the council felt the weight of something vast and unstoppable. It was the silence before thunder, the silence before the storm. And though the ambassador never spoke, every delegate in the chamber heard the same message in their minds. The first rule was broken. There will be no forgiveness. Across the galaxy, the boy's desperate message still echoed, carried from one ship to another, whispered in every station, replayed in every hidden corner. The words had become a storm by themselves. They took the children. Some shook their heads in disbelief, saying the council would never dare, that it must be false. But those who had lived long enough, those who carried scars of older wars, felt their blood run cold. They remembered. They had seen it once before, long ago, when another arrogant power thought humanity could be broken by striking at the most innocent. In those days the galaxy had not yet been united, and warlords ruled the stars. One warlord, greedy and blind, captured a convoy of human nursery ships, believing no army would defend something so weak. What followed had turned into legend. The veterans remembered how humanity did not send envoys, did not send threats, did not plead for peace. They remembered how silence spread first, like the quiet before lightning. Then came the fleets. Black steel ships emerging from the void like predators from shadows, engines howling with a sound that made whole planets tremble. They did not strike once and retreat. They hunted. For every child taken, 10 fleets were destroyed. For every cry silenced, a city burned. Entire species who had allied with the raiders found their worlds turned into ash. The humans did not stop when justice was done. They did not stop when victory was clear. They only stopped when there was nothing left to strike. The galaxy had begged them to end it. And only then had the humans paused, their anger settling back into silence, their fleets vanishing into the void. That was the birth of the first rule, the unspoken law every soldier carried in their hearts. Do not harm human children. Even when empires clashed, even when planets burned, the rule held strong. It was fear, not compassion, that kept it alive. For the galaxy had learned that nothing provoked humanity's wrath more than the sound of a child's cry. Now, with the Council's arrogance breaking that rule, the old veterans trembled again. On distant stations, grey-haired captains warned their crews. "Do you not feel it? It is happening again. I fought in those days. I saw their rage. If the Council truly took their children, then we are already doomed." Young soldiers laughed nervously, dismissing the old tales, but even they felt unease twist in their stomachs. Traders closed their routes through human space, fearing the storm that was sure to come. Smugglers swore they would not set foot near Terran sectors again, not until the sky was calm. And in the hidden archives of forgotten wars, the records began to play once more, showing images of worlds turned to dust, fleets torn apart, stars burning with the light of vengeance. The Council tried to dismiss it, calling the warnings superstition, insisting that humanity had grown soft, too polite, too bound by treaties to fight. But the galaxy was not fooled. The silence from human space was not peace. It was the same silence that had come before the storm in ages past. In human colonies, mothers and fathers wept in silence, their tears falling not only for their lost children but for the fire they knew was about to be unleashed. Generals did not speak of war, but their fleets began to vanish from docks, their convoys turned inward, their ships regrouping in the dark. Leaders spoke little, but their eyes were hard, their faces cold, their silence heavier than any declaration. The veterans knew this silence well. It was the same silence they had heard before worlds burned. And as they listened again, they whispered the same words to anyone who would hear. "You do not understand what you have unleashed. The humans are patient. Yes. They are polite. Yes. But when you break the first rule, you break the last chain holding back their fury. And when that fury comes, it does not stop." And so the galaxy remembered. They remembered the war cry that had once shaken the stars, the howl of Terran engines as fleets tore through enemies without mercy. They remembered the way humanity fought, not for conquest, not for wealth, but for their children. And everyone who remembered trembled. Because they knew what was coming, the galaxy held its breath. After the boys' desperate message spread, after veterans whispered warnings, after silence fell across human space, everyone waited. Days passed, then weeks, and still there were no words from Earth. The Council expected outrage, expected demands, expected envoys screaming for justice. But no messages came. No ambassadors stormed the chamber. No voices begged for mercy. Humanity said nothing. And that silence was worse than any war cry. Council delegates mocked at first, telling themselves that silence meant fear. "They are too afraid to act," one sneered. "They know they cannot face us." Others agreed, but their laughter was weaker now, their eyes shifting nervously to the dark reports trickling in. Convoys were missing. Outposts near human space had gone silent. Patrol ships that crossed too close to Terran borders never returned. When questioned, the Council enforcers could give no answers. The reports ended only in static, as if the void itself had swallowed the ship's whole. At first it seemed like rumor. But then the sky itself began to change. Along the edge of Council territory, strange readings appeared on sensors. Entire sectors reported sudden spikes of energy, phantom signals too vast to belong to a single fleet. Captains swore they saw shadows in the void, massive shapes moving where no ships should be. Then the first true sighting came. A mining station near the neutral zone picked up the sound before the image. A low, endless howl, not of wind, not of machine, but something alive, something that carried through the metal walls and made even the strongest tremble. Then the station's sensors cleared the static, and the sight froze every soul who saw it. Terran warships. Dozens at first, then hundreds, sliding out of the dark as if the void itself had given birth to them. Their hulls were black, their edges sharp, their engines glowing red like the eyes of predators. They moved as one, their formation perfect, their silence louder than any declaration of war. The miners abandoned their posts, whispering prayers, their hands shaking. The image spread quickly across the stars, replayed in stations, passed through secret channels, reaching even the halls of the Council. When the footage played, the chamber fell silent. Delegates who had laughed before shifted uneasily in their seats, their arrogance cracking under the weight of what they saw. Impossible, one muttered. They cannot have built so many ships without us knowing. But they had. For years, humanity had been silent, patient, polite, building in the shadows while the galaxy mocked them. Now the mask was gone. The fleets that had been hidden in dark shipyards, deep under ice moons, in forgotten systems, emerged into the light. And they were moving. Colony after colony reported sightings. Patrols sent to investigate vanished. Whole sectors whispered of Terran fleets gathering, their numbers growing with every passing day. The Council tried to silence the reports, to dismiss them as false, but even their own scouts did not return. Fear began to crawl into the chamber. The veterans spoke again, their voices shaking. Do you see now? The silence was not weakness. It was preparation. The sky is darkening. The storm is coming. Still, the arrogant ones pushed back. We outnumber them, one delegate roared, slamming his claw against the table. The Council's fleets are unmatched. We will crush them before they strike. But his words rang hollow. Even he looked pale as the footage replayed again, the Terran warships moving like a single living creature, their howling engines shaking the stars. Reports flooded in faster now. Small Council stations destroyed without warning. Outposts found abandoned, their crews missing, no bodies left behind. Merchants refused to enter Terran space, their routes vanishing from the charts. The galaxy itself seemed to shrink as the humans spread their silent shadow outward. And still, no demands came. No negotiations. No words. Only silence and the darkening sky. In human space, the preparations continued. Fleets vanished into the void, their movements hidden but their destination clear. Soldiers marched in silence, their faces hard, their weapons ready. Families lit candles not for mourning but for fire, for vengeance, for the promise that no child would ever be forgotten. The Council sat in their chamber, arguing, shouting, trembling, but none of their words mattered anymore. For outside their walls, the storm had already risen. The sky had darkened, and the howl of Terran engines was growing louder. The dark sky that had terrified outposts and shaken smugglers finally unleashed its storm. For weeks the Council had argued, pretending the silence of humanity meant hesitation, pretending the shadows moving in the void were illusions. But then the first strike came, sudden, precise, and unstoppable. It began at a Council forward base near the edge of human space. The base was large, fortified with defense towers and surrounded by patrol fleets, a symbol of the Council's power. Its commanders felt safe, laughing at the rumors of Terran movements, mocking the whispers of veterans. But safety is a fragile illusion, and that illusion shattered in a single night. Without warning, the stars around the base lit up with flashes of red. Dozens of Terran warships emerged from the void, their engines howling, their formation tight and perfect. Before the Council fleet could even scramble, the humans opened fire. Their weapons did not strike randomly. Every blast was precise, cutting through engines, shields, and command decks with surgical fury. Towers that had stood for decades crumbled in seconds. The Council's ships tried to return fire, but their shots went wide, their coordination falling apart. Against the silent discipline of Terran fleets, they looked clumsy, broken. Within minutes, the entire base was nothing but fire and wreckage. Not a single ship survived. The strike was not long. It was not chaotic. It was cold, controlled, and merciless. The humans did not broadcast demands. They did not send threats. They did not even stay to celebrate victory. When the base lay in ruins, the fleets turned in unison and vanished back into the void, leaving only silence behind. The news spread faster than light. Every channel carried the same images: Council ships burning, command towers collapsing, wreckage floating silently in the dark. Soldiers across the galaxy stared in disbelief. Citizens whispered in terror. Even the proud delegates of the Council felt their hearts pound in their chests. They had expected outrage, speeches, maybe negotiations. They had expected humanity to act like every other species, to beg or demand. But the humans had spoken in the only language they knew after the first rule was broken. Fire. Panic spread inside the chamber. Delegates shouted over each other, some calling for peace, others for war. "We must retaliate," one screamed, slamming his clawed fist against the table. "We cannot let them humiliate us." Another shrieked back, her crystalline body flickering. "Retaliate with what? Did you not see? They destroyed a fortress base in minutes. Our fleets are unprepared. We cannot win this." Fear crawled through every word, splitting the council into chaos. But outside their chamber, in the cold of space, there was no chaos in human ranks. Fleet after fleet moved in silence, their discipline unbroken, their purpose clear. They did not strike everywhere at once. They chose carefully, striking bases, fuel depots, and supply routes, always with precision, always leaving no survivors, and always vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. The Council's admirals tried to predict their moves, but the humans moved like ghosts. Where the Council expected them to strike, nothing happened. Where the Council thought they were safe, fire erupted. Entire sectors began to collapse, their defenses torn apart one piece at a time. And still humanity said nothing. No ambassadors came forward. No words of compromise were spoken. Only silence and destruction followed. The veterans watched and whispered, "This is how they fight. This is how they always fight. Quiet first, then fury, then silence again. They will not stop." In human space, families lit candles for their stolen children, their faces grim but proud. They knew the fleets were moving, they knew vengeance had begun, and they knew their children would not be forgotten. The galaxy trembled as more strikes came, each one swift, each one merciless. The first rule had been broken, and now the humans were teaching the Council why that rule had been born. The first strike was only the beginning. The Council chamber that once roared with laughter and arrogance was now drowning in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices shrill, their bodies trembling, their pride cracking under the weight of news pouring in from every sector. The great dome above flickered with holos of burning bases, shattered fleets, and black silhouettes of Terran warships gliding through wreckage like predators moving through a graveyard. The High Speaker struck his staff against the floor again and again, but his command no longer carried the power it once did. His glowing body dimmed with strain as he begged for order, but no one listened. The chamber was broken. Some delegates demanded immediate retaliation. "We are the Council," one screamed, his mandibles clacking in rage. "We cannot bow to these savages. We must gather our fleets, strike back, show them who rules the stars." His voice rang hollow even as he shouted, for his claws trembled, and sweat glistened on his scaled skin. Others cried out in terror, their voices shaking. "Strike them? With what? Did you not see the reports? They destroyed a fortress in minutes. Our fleets are scattered, our supply lines shattered. Every outpost near human space has gone silent." A crystalline matriarch rose, her body flickering so violently it looked as though she might shatter. "You fools! This is not a war we can win. Do you not understand? The first rule was broken. This is no longer about territory, no longer about power. They are fighting for their children. And when humans fight for their children, nothing in this galaxy can stop them." Her words silenced a few, but only for a moment. Others exploded in denial, their pride refusing to break. "They are still only one species," another shouted, his tentacles thrashing. "We outnumber them. We control 100 fleets, 1,000 worlds. How can they stand against us?" His question hung in the air, but none dared answer. For they had already seen the truth. Numbers meant nothing when ships burned before they could fire, when fleets disappeared into silence, when whole sectors fell without warning. Humanity was not fighting with numbers. They were fighting with precision, with patience, with rage sharpened into something colder than vengeance. Panic spread further as new reports arrived, carried on trembling voices of messengers. "Another base destroyed. Our supply convoys have vanished. Entire colonies refuse to send troops. They are afraid." The chamber shook with arguments. Some demanded surrender, insisting humanity must be appeased before the storm consumed them all. Others demanded escalation, calling for weapons long forbidden, desperate to claw back pride already lost. But through all the noise, one truth echoed in the minds of those who still remembered the old stories. Humanity was not negotiating. Humanity was not demanding. Humanity was not asking for anything. They were simply moving forward, one strike at a time, with silence as their banner and fire as their answer. The veterans in the chamber shook their heads, their voices drowned in the chaos, but their words were clear. This is how it begins. The silence, the strikes, the panic. You have doomed us all. The High Speaker tried again, his voice cracking as he begged for unity. We must not collapse. We are the Council. We are the law of the galaxy. But even he could not hide the fear in his eyes. His glow dimmed further, his staff shaking in his hand. The chamber that once mocked humanity now looked less like rulers of the galaxy and more like frightened prey cornered by a predator they had awakened themselves. Outside the chamber, across the stars, the Terran fleets kept moving. No words. No threats. No mercy. The Council's panic meant nothing to them. The humans had already decided their path. The first rule had been broken. And now the galaxy itself would pay the price. The chamber shook with arguments and fear when the doors opened. Every delegate turned, their voices falling silent as the sound of steady footsteps echoed against the polished floor. The human ambassador had returned. He walked with calm precision, his uniform simple, his face unreadable. But the silence that followed him was heavier than armor, sharper than any blade. He did not glance at the panicked delegates or the High Speaker who trembled at his dais. He simply walked to the center of the chamber, where the seal of the Council glowed beneath the great dome, and stood there in absolute stillness. The delegates shifted uneasily, their whispers fading. The ambassador's eyes swept across the chamber, cold and calm, until no one dared meet his gaze. At last the High Speaker, his crystal body flickering, tried to speak. Ambassador, humanity's actions, these strikes, these attacks, surely there is some way to... His words died in his throat when the human finally spoke. His voice was quiet, calm, but it carried through the chamber like thunder. The first rule was broken. No introduction, no greeting, no courtesy. Just those words. The delegates froze, their eyes widening, their bodies stiff with fear. The ambassador continued, his voice steady, every syllable cutting like steel. We gave you centuries of peace. We gave you patience. We gave you restraint. You mocked us. You laughed at us. You thought our silence was weakness. His gaze hardened, and some of the delegates lowered their heads, ashamed, afraid, unable to bear the weight of his words. You took our children, he said, his tone colder still. You broke the one law every species in this galaxy knew. The oldest law. The only law that kept you safe from us. The Tarvek warlord, desperate to regain pride, slammed his fist on the table. We are the Council. You cannot dictate law to us. You think your fleets can threaten us forever? You think your fury will break us? But his voice cracked as he spoke, and his bravado died when the ambassador's eyes turned toward him. The human's expression never changed, but his silence pressed harder than any weapon. The warlord lowered his gaze like a child scolded, his massive frame trembling despite his armor. The ambassador raised his voice again, still calm, still controlled, but now it carried the weight of history. This is not a war for conquest. This is not about power. This is about the children you took. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not stop. The words fell like a hammer, echoing across the dome. The screens above flickered to life, showing images from the void. Burning fleets, shattered stations, Terran warships gliding through wreckage like hunters through ash. The delegates stared in horror, their arguments silenced, their arrogance broken. The ambassador's voice cut through the silence once more. You thought humanity was tame. You thought our courtesy would last forever. You thought you could break us without consequence. He paused, his gaze sweeping the chamber one final time. Now you will learn the truth. We are not tame. We are not weak. We are the children of a death world. And when you break the first rule, there is no council, no fleet, no power in this galaxy that can protect you from what comes next. The chamber was silent, the delegates pale and trembling, their bodies frozen in fear. The High Speaker opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The ambassador did not wait for an answer. He turned sharply, his footsteps echoing as he walked toward the great doors. The silence he left behind was worse than any threat, for it carried with it the weight of certainty. Humanity was coming, and nothing could stop them. The silence inside the council chamber lingered long after the human ambassador's footsteps faded into the distance. No one moved. No one spoke. The most powerful leaders of the galaxy sat frozen in their seats like statues carved from fear. The great dome that had once echoed with laughter now felt like a tomb, heavy with the weight of truth. The first rule had been broken, and there would be no escape from its consequence. Outside the chamber, across the stars, the truth was already spreading faster than light. In border sectors, traders whispered the words to each other with pale faces. They took the children. On mining stations, old veterans gripped their chests, trembling as memories they had buried for centuries clawed their way back. The storm has come again. On neutral worlds, civilians pulled their families close, their eyes turning to the sky as if expecting black Terran warships to emerge from the void at any moment. Fear was no longer confined to the Council. It was everywhere, sinking into the bones of every species. And soon, fear turned into proof. Reports came in one after another, too many to silence, too many to deny. Council fleets shattered in ambushes. Supply lines erased in hours. Stations burning in silence with no survivors. Entire colonies abandoned overnight, their people too terrified to stand against the storm. Everywhere, the same pattern emerged. The humans did not speak, did not demand, did not negotiate. They struck with precision, vanished like shadows, and left nothing but silence in their wake. It was not a war for territory. It was not conquest. It was retribution, clean and merciless. The galaxy trembled. The council collapsed into panic, its chamber now a place of endless shouting. Some delegates begged to surrender, their voices cracking with desperation. Give back what was taken. Return the children and beg for forgiveness, they cried. Others shrieked in denial, their pride clinging to words that no longer carried weight. We are still the council. We are still the law. We cannot bow to them. But even as they shouted, their eyes betrayed the truth. They had seen the fleets. They had seen what silence could unleash. No amount of law, no banner of unity, no number of ships could erase the dread now carved into their hearts. Meanwhile, humanity moved with cold purpose. On Earth, leaders stood before their people, their faces solemn, their voices steady. They did not cry for war. They simply announced that the first rule had been broken, and that justice would be delivered. Across human space, fleets departed from hidden shipyards, their engines howling through the void. Soldiers stood ready, their eyes hard, their silence unshaken. Families lit fires in their windows, not in mourning but in defiance, flames that burned as bright as the rage in their hearts. The boys' desperate signal, the one that had carried through static and fear, was replayed again and again. And every time it was heard, it sharpened the resolve of humanity. The children would not be forgotten. The children would be avenged. Entire civilizations who had once mocked humans now shivered, whispering prayers that the storm would not touch them. Even enemies of humanity kept silent, unwilling to provoke what they could no longer deny. In the end, the galaxy did not remember the Council's arrogance, nor its laws, nor its pride. It remembered the fire of human warships tearing through fleets. It remembered the silence before every strike, the howl of engines as shadows emerged from the void, the cold gaze of an ambassador who needed no threats to break the strongest leaders in the galaxy. And most of all, it remembered the rule that was now carved deeper than ever into the bones of every species. Do not harm human children. From that day forward, it was no longer a whisper passed among soldiers. It was no longer a superstition dismissed in council halls. It became law stronger than any treaty, etched into fear itself. Never again would anyone dare test it. The council, once proud, sat broken, its power shattered not by conquest but by truth. They had broken the first rule. Humanity had answered. And the galaxy would never forget.